What's up, y'all? Welcome to the pilot episode, even though we know we're going to keep going. The pilot episode of the Big Boys. My man, Carl Reed.
I'm here with the big dog, Neely, in
Coach.
the building, baby.
How you making it, brother?
Man, I'm good. It's good to be down here in Colorado with you today.
Yeah, and you here in Colorado, you got to hang out with Coach Prime and the team yesterday. Going to be here for a few days. You saw it. Do you like what you see?
I like what I see because when I was here in the spring, Neely, you know, obviously the roster changed since then. I came back in the summer for summer workouts, but it's nothing like seeing the kids get out there in the equipment. It was actually pleasant for me to see Shiloh Sanders yesterday because that was my first time really being able to see him in action.
Okay.
And so he showed me some nice things yesterday.
Yeah. Man, you know, Charles Kelly is big on Shiloh. And it ain't big on him because your dad is the head coach. It's big on him because of the process and the mental reps he's taking. Like, for example, when the safeties go to lunch, they get their plates and they go to the film room without being told to, without being encouraged to. It's something they're doing on their own. So Shiloh is emerging as a leader, man.
He's definitely a leader, both vocally and the way he plays on the field, the way he goes about his business. He will get after guys, and he plays really physical. He'll hit you like a linebacker, too, now.
I think he wants to be a linebacker. He wants to be a cornerback linebacker. I guess that's why he's a safety. You take the best of both worlds.
Well, hey, we're going to get to see what he do this fall for sure.
Yeah, no doubt about it, man. You know, week one is a fixed thing in college football. You can't postpone it. You can't make it come no sooner. And time is always the enemy in preparation. And these guys are getting closer to their first week.
You know, as you get ready for the first game, coming out of camp, it's just the mental strain of it. How much work did you put in camp in the off season? Are you really understanding the systems? You got two coordinators in here, Charles Kelly and Sean Lewis, that are giving the teams a lot of information, a lot to process, because you have to put a lot in before that week one game.
Yeah, man, I've had the pleasure, the challenge, Coach, of sitting in on Coach Kelly's installs. It's a lot.
Well, you know, he comes from that Alabama coaching tree.
Yeah.
Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, those guys believe in stalling a lot on defense. If you've seen those defense play before, you'll be able to see a 4-3 sometimes, a 4-2-5. They'll go to a 3-4 look. I've even seen them jump into a 3-3 stack before. So their percentages are crazy, and they're asking you mentally to process a lot of information.
And that's one thing Coach Kelly told me. It's like part of his evaluation, if you will, is not just out there on the field. It's what you can absorb mentally. How smart are you? How do you react? How can you learn it? Because if you don't know it, you can't do it fast. You got to be confident.
I tell young ball players this all of the time. You have to be able to process the information mentally. That's really the key to being able to play. You just can't go out there and be big, fast, and strong. You have to understand the scheme. You have to understand the down and distance. You have to understand situational football. And so guys who can do that, they typically have more success on the field.
And Coach, here's one of the things I love about the Charles Kellys and these defenses, and it's from the top to bottom with Coach Prime and everybody on the staff. These young men believe in them because they've seen them succeed. Again, defensively, Charles Kelly, Alabama when they went undefeated in the SEC. And that's something hard to do now.
It's very hard.
Florida State national championship. The guy has put people in the NFL, coached Derwin James, coached Jalen Ramsey. So these young men know those players and know those accomplishments, and they're like, whatever you teach us, I'm going to learn.
Well, when you got a guy that comes in with the credibility of having done it, can you argue with it? You can't. You can't argue with the success. His history ain't no mystery.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So when he stands in front of a room, everybody knows who he is, what he's done, who he's coached, what he's accomplished. So it makes it easier for him to get the ears of the team.
Tell you what we're not going to do. We're not going to just fly by. His history ain't no mystery. That's got to get on a coffee mug, a T-shirt, a bumper sticker.
Hey, well, you know, when you got a resume, you got a resume.
Yeah.
And so a lot of guys will say what they can do, but he has shown over a very long period of time that he's really, really him.
Speaking of resumes, man, we got to get into yours. You know, the big boys with Neely, Coach Carl Reed, you ain't just in here by no accident. You know, your work with 24/7, your work in covering recruitment and everything that's happening in the fast-moving world of college football. You bring up your history ain't no mystery either.
You know, I feel fortunate because I still feel like a high school football coach. I was a high school football coach for years. And so just that work ethic, that mentality, and those relationships, I got to be around a lot of special people. And so it parlayed into a situation at 24/7, which is a great place to work. Great people, great company, and it gives you an opportunity to go around and cover the best that college football has to offer.
And speaking of, perfect segue again, man, because the Big Boys is not just about CU football and Coach Prime. We're going to be talking about everything across the college football space. What are you seeing out there as we get closer and closer, to this season 2023, a season that is still learning the transfer portal, still learning NIL? What do you see this is the wave now?
Well, I see what's happening lately is we got to discuss realignment.
Okay.
The way that all the conferences and everything has shifted in terms of where everybody's going to play. The Pac-12 has pretty much been decimated.
Yeah.
So we don't know what's going to be the future of the Pac-12. CU is going to the Big 12. We got UCLA and USC going to the Big 10. Oregon and Washington just announced they're going to the Big 10. So what we've done away with is those regional rivalries, those things that we grew up watching.
Yeah.
What's going to happen with the Rose Bowl?
Yeah, who knows?
Who knows? But that's the granddaddy of them all.
Yeah.
Right? So we don't know, but I think realignment is a huge thing. Obviously, when you talk NIL, when you talk transfer portal, those things are here to stay, and they all over the place. But I think that as we continue to go on, things will settle down a little bit. We still got the old guard kind of fighting against the way the game is turned to. But the coach or coaches who adjust, adapt, and accept that this is what college football is right now, those are the guys that are going to be winning for the next decade.
Well, let me tell you this. Nobody adjusts, adapts, and embraces like Deion Sanders does when it comes to pulse of the culture, the wave, particularly branding, marketing, NIL, all those things.
Well, that's because that's who he was as a player. Yeah. And so every single thing that he's done in his career has got you ready for a moment like this. He's coached high school kids. He's coached youth football. He was also one of the most marketable athletes during his tenure. So he can really relate to the guys wanting to get paid, wanting to be marketed. And you got to remember, he was a professional baseball player also. So initially coming out of college, he was under contract as a baseball player and was really a walk-on the football team for all intents and purposes. He has been involved in marketing for a very long time.
Yeah. And one thing about that marketing as attached to realignment and recruitment and all that, you talk about the Pac-12. I'm not here to manage Stanford's business, but it looks like they got to be like Notre Dame and go independent with their academic rigors and all that, because that conference, it's on life support, man. It's only 4 people left.
Stanford, to me, is one of the schools who can do that. Because when you go to Stanford, you're talking about a completely different type of academic person. Some of the most brilliant people ever. I've dealt with Stanford a lot in recruiting, and I mean, just the things that they have for those young men that go to Stanford, it's an unbelievable product that they have. And so I do think that Stanford can survive as an independent, but you never know, man, what's going to happen next with this realignment
No, you
situation.
don't. The phone is going to ring. But here's what we do know. With Coach Prime and CU moving further east, that is now 2 to 4 times a year you're playing in Texas. Every other year getting to play in Florida, now playing in Ohio. Man, what does it mean for that brand with him over it moving to those recruitment hotbeds?
Well, I think it gives him some natural recruiting ties to areas that he's very familiar with. Having built a strong youth program and a high school program in Texas, being a former Dallas Cowboy, he has great ties in the state of Texas. Being from Fort Myers, Florida, having played at Florida State, obviously everybody in the state of Florida is very familiar with him. So going to a conference where you're going to be playing teams that are based in those states, where you're going to be playing games in those states, it gives him an opportunity to really put his footprint in the state of Texas and in the state of Florida from a recruiting standpoint.
Man, when you put all that in a barrel, you got Miami, Florida State, Florida. I'm saying in a couple of years that CU will be number 2 in that state in recruiting that state.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, if they're number 2, then Florida, Miami, and Florida State, they may be pushed back a little bit too, because we can't forget what Gus Malzahn is doing at Central Florida. He is the one who's been dominating in recruiting lately, and it's kind of turned into a race between Central Florida and Florida State when we talk about recruiting in the state of Florida. Miami and Florida are kind of pulling up the rear.
Yeah. So this realignment thing, I mean, where we going, Carl? You think conferences with 16 to 20 teams in them?
Yeah, and then we still haven't settled in what's going to happen with the ACC, right? You got Clemson, you got Duke, because you got to put Duke in there because of the basketball. So they become a hotbed. You got Florida State, you got the University of Miami. What happens with those programs? Do they try to get into the SEC? Does somebody else combine leagues? We're not at the tip of the iceberg. We're at the finish line, but there's still a couple of big moves on the table that have to be made.
A lot of decisions for these ADs, man. And you have to look at those numbers and really crunch them. We are 50 years now to Title IX, and we're sitting here talking about football, which is the bell cow, the cash cow for athletic departments. But when you're talking about going from, say, a California all the way up to New Jersey and Rutgers to play volleyball, it's a lot of other ancillary things in the athletic departments that have to be considered.
I would have to think that they thought through that a little bit. Although football drives the bus, I would have to think that with as many teams as they're putting in conferences, I don't know if they would put a team from California against a team from the East Coast on a Tuesday night softball game.
Yeah.
I have to think that they have something going on that we don't know about yet. I would be disappointed if that became a norm, because we have to also consider the other athletes as well.
Yeah, you do. And one thing that we have to consider, although oftentimes it falls on the back burner, is not athletes, it's student athletes. And the way these conferences are growing and going past being regional, that's a lot of travel time and away from school. So we got to say, look now, are we serious about this amateur sports thing, or this is what it is and we big boys?
No, I don't think that people are serious about academics as they do. Academics is a taboo thing that you're supposed to talk about. You are supposed to come in and say, academics is the most important thing. That's what the parents want to hear. That's what the public wants to hear you say. But every move on the table has shown us, Neely, that that's not really the truth. Academics get pushed to the back burner. They're going to tell you, hey, you just got to deal with it, man. And so I don't think that academics was in the thought process of a lot of this, because if it was, you would have considered the travel that some of these people are going to have. And the problem is that we're going to have, Neely, is, and you always have this struggle when it comes to academics, is just because everybody realigned for the sports team does not mean the professors are going to be on board with some of the extended time that's going to be needed for some of these athletes.
You have to have their buy-in.
Yeah.
You have to have their buy-in. All right, as we get ready to close this first ever episode of Minute to Come to Big Boys, one other thing I want to touch on with you, because you are a recruiting expert as far as these scholarship offers, when they're real, when they're not real. Here's what I found. I use basketball as an example. Years ago, before the portal, you may have been the top 10 shooting guard coming out of high school. Now with the portal opening and experienced shooting guards transferring, you're now like maybe the 40th shooting guard. How do we manage when kids should accept scholarships, when they don't, particularly from high school, because you're competing against now guys who can transfer?
What I would tell any high school player, I don't care whether you're a football, basketball, baseball player, at the moment that you have real interest and real committable offers from a college, you should really consider committing to those. You don't want to go into the summer before your senior year not having figured out what you're doing. In about 30 days, kids are going to start quitting their teams and saying, I'm going into the transfer portal. And at the point that those kids start jumping in the portal, Neely, everybody's going to stop with the high school kids, and they're going to start going through, I got this guy in the portal, I got that guy in the portal. So if you're still waiting right now, you're going to be competing not just with high school kids shortly, but with those guys coming out of the transfer portal. And what the game has shown us the last 2 years, those are the guys who get sought after first.
Amen, brother. Man, we have showed you just a glimpse of what you're going to be getting from the big boys on a regular basis, weekly basis. Coach Carl Reed from 24/7, Neely from Thee Pregame Show. Naturally, we're going to be giving you all the insight that you can handle from what's going on with CU football and Coach Prime, but also what's going on in college football. Once these games start rolling and these polls start coming out and these predictions start coming, we're going to be talking about matchups and everything else you want. It's the big boys, man.
And there's going to always be something big going on in college football every week.